Hello. I want to spend just a few minutes going over assignment 1, exposure. So this assignment, the premise is basically that, correctly exposing your subject isn't just a visual issue. It's not just going to be about, photographic technique and composition. It also changes the way that your subject is viewed and represented, and how they're interpreted by others. So we're going to start with the reading, Teaching the Camera to See My Skin, which I think is a really good summation of how, something as simple as camera exposure can affect a subject and how somebody is being interpreted. So for this assignment, what you're going to be turning in is 8 images. 8 JPEG files will be turned into the class Flickr page. 8 raw files will be turned into the Canvas assignment. So if you want to shoot the assignment on raw plus JPEG mode, that's completely fine. That's probably the easiest way to go about this. If you wanted to instead shoot in raw mode and then create JPEG versions of these to upload to Flickr, that is also completely fine. Just make sure you go over the technical tutorials and are comfortable with output that retains all of your camera data, right? So as some software programs, the defaults are to remove all the camera data from your images. That's not going to work for us. We need to be able to see how the images were shot to give you good feedback. So on Flickr especially, you need to be able to see all of the information for each photograph that you turn in there. So my recommendation, again, you can just shoot in RAW plus JPEG mode. If you're already comfortable with output, just make sure that your images are being exported with all of the, camera data retained. And again, if you don't already know how to do that, that's no problem. Some of the video tutorials are going to cover that as well. So for this assignment, again, you'll be turning in the raw files on Canvas, the JPEG files on Flickr, and you're going to be basically covering 4 major categories. You're going to be trying to meter a dark subject against a dark background successfully, a light subject against a light background, a backlit subject, and then one of them is going to be a 5-stop bracketing to really, for that image, I would say you want to choose a situation that's pretty high contrast. It can either be maybe a low light situation at night. It can be, something during the day, but where there's a real range of lighting and mixed lighting situations. It's a good idea to have this anyway for images which are really instrumental, where you really have to have a good exposure. Bracketing is a great skill and a great use in those situations. So we're just going to be kind of going over all of these techniques. Now, if you're already, have a great background in camera control, you've already been using your DSLR cameras for a while, you feel like you have, camera control really down, you may not have to go back and look at a lot of the slide lectures for this week. If, on the other hand, maybe you're coming from a film-based photography course and you're a little bit new to digital shooting, or maybe you just, need a little review or didn't quite get all of that covered in a previous photo course, I would highly recommend going through all of the lectures in the category for the week. So I indented the lectures. You'll be able to see there's a range of technical lectures you can look at that kind of cover all of these techniques of manual camera control. It's a good idea to review anyway. If it's been a little while and you're not shooting constantly and you haven't been shooting on manual all the time, it's probably a good idea to kind of go over some of these skills and just brush up on them before you try shooting for the assignment. So a few of the major camera control and exposure points we should go over. You have to shoot on fully manual exposure M mode, pretty much for all assignments in this course. We're going to review a little bit the exposure triangle, how aperture, shutter, and ISO work together to create the image. Adjust aperture to control depth of field. Wider apertures blur backgrounds, narrow ones keep more in focus. So the aperture, of course, controls depth of field as well as how much light is coming into your camera. Using the shutter to freeze motion or create motion blur, right? Faster speeds capture action, slower speeds can convey movement. But again, if nothing is moving in your shot, the shutter is used to control the duration of the shot, how much time light comes into your camera. Set ISO to manage sensitivity to light. So this works a little bit differently than film. In film, high ISO levels are not really a problem, right? It's just bigger grain structures to your film. It can be a pretty interesting look. Pretty much nobody likes the look of a noisy photograph, right? So image noise is basically sampling error. So the same setting, say you had a 3200 speed film, that's going to be a gritty, grainy look that can actually be pretty interesting. A 3200 setting with your digital camera, depending on the camera you're using and how it renders images in low light, you're going to see a lot of image noise. It kind of just looks like weird color dots, or things can look a little soft focused. In general, with digital, you want to shoot with DSLR cameras at 400 ISO as below whenever possible. So, I mean, in some situations in low light, you need to increase this in order to, not have motion blur in your subject. If you're capturing a moving subject in low light, this is necessary sometimes. But in general, just get in the habit of shooting at 400, ISO whenever possible. So bracketing exposure when possible is going to ensure a good exposure. So just make sure that, if you really need to have a shot that has a good, balance exposure in there, that you're, trying the bracketing techniques. And also experimenting with different metering modes to ensure proper exposure based on your subject and scene. So some situations might need a spot meter, some situations are better if you do evaluative. There's a few different metering modes we're going to kind of go over that you can look at and use in various situations. So try different point of views, move closer and farther away. Try shooting from different positions, perspectives, and camera angles. Consider composition and framing, right? Consider line, form, contrast, pattern, color relationships, what areas you want to include or exclude. So again, if it's been a little bit of a while for you and you haven't been shooting, frequently recently, you might want to go back and look at the compositional lecture again, just to kind of cover some of the main strategies of composition. Avoid centered compositions. It's usually best not to center your main subject in the frame, but instead balance your subjects in the frame asymmetrically, right? Paying careful attention to your subject's relationship to other elements in the foreground and background. Sharp focus. Focus your lens carefully to make sure your subject is in focus. This seems basic, but there's no real way in post-process to make something that's shot out of focus look good. It's just one of the things we still can't do. So just make sure you're being very careful with your focus. Using a variety of different backgrounds and lighting situations, right? Find locations, backgrounds, and lighting that you like. You should try both indoor and outdoor settings for these techniques. Experiment. Challenge yourself to use unconventional subjects, point of view, and compositions. Again, I'm mostly looking at your camera control technique for this assignment, but I do want this also to be an opportunity for you to work creatively and come up with interesting compositions and subjects. So consider all elements of your frame, including all elements of the background, right? So part of a photography course is training us to really look carefully when coming up with an image and creating an image. I mean, if you're just not really thinking about that, most people just kind of center their subjects, put something in the middle of the frame, and don't really look at the background when they're shooting. Photography courses teach you to do the opposite, to look at every element of everything in your frame and frame things really strategically. So all images must be shot in manual mode. All images turned in this semester for all assignments must be new and original photographs shot by you. So don't turn in any work shot before the course started. I want you to shoot specifically with these techniques in mind. Don't do any post-processing, cropping, or adjustments on these specific photographs. In later assignments, it's going to be all about that. We're going to be really looking at post-process to change our images. For this assignment, it's all about getting it right in your camera the first time. So you're going to be really strategically shooting your subjects, knowing that you can't go back and edit them for the assignment. You should have your camera's date and time set correctly before you start shooting. So, that's great to do anyway. If you don't have the camera's date and time set correctly before you start shooting, it can run into a lot of problems when your images are being saved and, recorded. So basically most systems that you're using for downloading your photographs and organizing them are organizing them by date time. So if the date time is not correct and your image is, saying that it was shot in 1992, but it was actually shot today, this is going to be a problem for kind of going back and trying to find the photograph and look at it later. So just make sure you set date time correctly first before you start shooting. So also for this course, we're a raw shooting course. So all the images you turn in on Canvas are going to be the raw, unaltered version of those photographs, or you're going to be uploading raw images with an XMP file, basically a little sidecar file that goes with your photograph to instruct me how it's supposed to look after processing. But I'll still have access to the raw, unedited version before that. Couple things, when you turn in your images on Flickr, just make sure your Flickr preferences are set to public instead of private. That way we'll be able to see the image and all the camera data that goes with it. And just a reminder, all images for this course should be taken with a DSLR or equivalent mirrorless digital camera. If there are other, cameras and techniques you want to use, this isn't really a film course, this is a digital course. So we're assuming you kind of take your film-based skills. I've had a few students in this course in the past, shoot medium format film and scan them and work that way. That's okay with me as long as we talk about it ahead of time and you're recording all of your settings separately, so that's something you can be uploaded with your images. But in general, it would probably be a good idea to approach this course using the best digital cameras you have access to. You're probably going to notice better results coming out of this. So for this assignment, this is really about showing off your technical camera control skills that you've learned in a previous course and this course, and kind of making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of technique before we move on to more thematic-based assignments. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions after reviewing all of the course material for the week. And all of the lectures. If you're feeling stuck, if you need help with anything, by all means, please reach out and let me know. I'm always happy to help.